do also like that you have the same blazer on today that you have on in your picture, so everybody knows it's really you. So good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Julian. I'm the director for the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. And today we're going to talk about strategies for success in a hybrid work environment. We have been working in a remote work environment due to the pandemic. There's been a real change in the way the world sees hybrid work, the way the world embraces hybrid work, and we're going to talk about the benefits of that and some other great strategies today. So what we're going to cover in our time together, which is just over an hour, is we're going to talk about best practices that you can put into work immediately. Like, what is hybrid work environment? How does this look? What are some tools? What are some tricks? And then we're going to have a quick review of technology-enabled hybrid work environments that help make hybrid work environments more effective. Then we're going to answer your questions. There's also a tutorial. And I want to note that back about a year ago, and then back in 2020, we also did sessions on remote work. This is going to be a little different. And in doing so, I want to be sure that we're defining what we're looking at and what a hybrid work environment is. So hybrid work is a flexible approach that combines working in an office and working from home. In many cases, it allows employees to choose how and where they work. It offers autonomy to employees to design their work week in ways that work both for them and the company policies, or your institution policies, or your agency policies. So hybrid work is that idea of some time in the office and some time at home. So what's a hybrid schedule? A hybrid work schedule is a flexible work model that combines remote work in the office, and then it lets employees work from home on some days and in the office on other days. Workers don't need to be in the office all of the time, but they're not strictly telecommute either. So this is not a remote work conversation. This isn't the perks of just being remote. This is that idea of how do you balance when your team is partially inside in the office and partially out of the office. Instead of team members on hybrid teams reap the benefits of both worlds, the camaraderie of the office plus the focus on flexibility of remote work. So we're going to talk about some models. There are 3 different work models. There's an in-office work schedule, which is team members work from the office all the time. And this is something that we were very familiar with pre-pandemic. And really, there's a lot of people who feel that we should get back to that. Everybody in the office, we're all here together, and we all need to be sitting in an office together. Remote work schedule is everyone in the team works remotely from a different location, sometimes different time zones. Because this is for Illinois, we're not going to go into the challenges of time zone work and how it's, if people are on East Coast versus West Coast versus Central time zone. But that is one of the challenges if you are working for a larger corporation or a larger agency that has people on both coasts. There's physically no office, but remote employees may see each other in person a few times a year, events and offsite meetings. So a great example is, I know the federal government is moving to this in different areas. I have some personal friends and family members who work for the federal government, and they only go in once a quarter. So they go to DC once a quarter. Their home offices are their homes, and they're expected to keep those schedules. And then the hybrid work schedule, which is what we're going to talk about today. This is the combination of the 2 prior models. Employees are able to work from home some days and from the office and others. Some hybrid work models let employees choose when they come in, while more structured schedules dedicate specific work days or in-office work. So we're going to talk about those different models and those different schedules. And really, you guys can decide what works best for you. I don't know if we have, and maybe we could do a little show of hands. How many people do we have that get to maintain their, well, we'll come to that later. Let's go through a little bit more. So schedules, there are options and different models for scheduling. So we're going to talk about what those look like. And I really encourage you to choose what works well for you, because there are sometimes it's chosen for you, and we'll talk about that too. So different kinds of hybrid work schedules. So according to a Asana poll, 56% of companies have an adoption of a hybrid work model, and that is an at-will schedule. And what the at-will schedule means is that employees can choose which days they come into the office. One employee might choose to come in on Tuesdays one week and Thursdays the next week. There is no prescribed schedule, and employees must follow. I will say this is not an option that, as a state employee, that I was granted. So employees' flexibility is foundational to this schedule, and it gives the decision-making power to the hands of the employees. It really is dependent on the employers to make their schedule and determine what works best for them. The downside of this at work at will hybrid schedule is that you don't have any time where all the team is together. And so to schedule that time, that is very challenging. The other downside of this is that if you have collaboration efforts, if you have coordination efforts, it is a little trying if everybody's in different spaces or if we're not sure where people are at what times. So as a manager, this one would be a little difficult for me, but I will say that that is one that in particular sectors of the private sector is very, very open and adopted. The hybrid split week schedule is being adopted as well. This is where companies assign days of the week for specific team members to come in. I've seen this a lot in the private sector. So you can work from home any day, or you can work in the office any day, but on Tuesdays is going to be our team's anchor day. And so everyone will be in. I'm also seeing this at State Farm and country companies where they'll say, this day we're all going to be in the office for the IT sector, or this day for purchasing, we're all going to be in the office. Whereas the other days of the week are flexible. So that's that split week schedule. Teams and function dictates the decision. For example, you could schedule your marketing team and your data team to come in on Tuesday so they can work together, while you schedule your customer service and sales team to come in on Thursday. So a little bit of flexibility, but also that idea of intentional collaboration and coordination. The third model there, or the third work schedule, would be the hybrid manager scheduling. Hybrid manager scheduling is a policy that is least common according to business. And in this work schedule, managers choose which day their team is in the office. This schedule fosters high levels of productivity and collaboration. And the main difference between the split week and the manager scheduling is that the split week scheduling work schedules the company decides which days the employee comes in, whereas the manager scheduling, the manager decides. So that one really depends on how your team or agency is structured. For ISU, we are much more of a team schedule. So we're not all here at the same time at ISU, but you do have to work with your team and your direct reports as to when we come in. The last one is a mix. So the last hybrid work schedule would be a hybrid mix, exactly what it sounds like. It's a mix of all three. 25% of the company are using a mix to match methods and really allowing what works for what areas. And some people are doing this, some agencies are doing this as well, saying, okay, you have to be in the office 2 days a week, but you can determine that with your team. And then you say, okay, well, we're going to do the manager schedule where we're all here at this time. Or they say we're going to do a split week schedule and we just need to have an anchor day or something of that nature. So there are four different really ways of looking at hybrid scheduling. And then types of scheduling models. So now you have the different types of scheduling. What are the scheduling models? There's the 3-2 model, the individualized model, the staggering scheduling model. So employees spend 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. This hybrid work policy is easy to coordinate and allows everyone to be in the office the same days during the week. Now, again, it doesn't have to all be the same days, but sometimes some teams choose to do that. That's the beauty of hybrid, is it really is very focused on the employee's needs and then the team's needs, or the team's needs and then the employee's needs. There's at least one drawback, though, and the 3-2 schedule doesn't allow companies to downsize their office space. So if you're working for an entity that's really looking to downsize their office space or to reduce rent, the 3-2 model doesn't really work well because everyone is coming in the office 3 days of the week. The bottom, or the individualized model, also known as the bottoms-up model, the company lets the individual team decide which days they will be in the office. They set a goal like 2 days in the office per week, and then they let each team decide what works best for them. And that is really where we are with where I work at, is the institution is set, you need to be in the office 2 to 3 days a week, and then your team gets to determine that. The individualized model allows the team to work together to determine what office schedule is optimal for everyone. And since different teams are in different offices, but on different days, it does allow that opportunity, if you're looking at a large organization, to possibly downsize. Staggered scheduling model, this doesn't just specify the days the employee should come in, but it also determines what time they should come in. So a staggered schedule allows for individuals to come in, like, say this group works from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then another group works at a different schedule on a different day. It also determines what time they should come in down to the exact hour of arrival and departure. Staggered schedules are most rigid cohort schedule and are best for shift-driven work. For example, doctors' offices might have a staggered schedule. And we saw a lot of this during COVID where people would come into the office, but they didn't want too many people in the office at the same time. So we'd have individuals coming into the office, but then just to lower the amount of people on, say, campus or on in an institution or at an agency, those individuals were asked to leave at a certain time, go to remote work, and then have different individuals come in. So there's quite a few different models. I mean, it's really what's going to work best for your team and what your organization allows for or allows you to do. As I said, most organizations their leadership does give some kind of guidance. And so really find out what your organization's guidance is and see how that works best for you. What I do want to note is hybrid employees tend to outperform office-only employees and are far happier. The reason is that flexibility is a huge benefit to them. They get to do activities they really value while outperforming at work. And this is not just an Amy Julian quote. This is Professor Nicholas Bloom from Stanford University. I started diving into this because I wanted to do a great job for this presentation, but also there's a ton of research on this. And as somebody who manages a hybrid team, there's a lot of things that you really look into. How are we doing it effectively? Are we doing it effectively? What are those things that we can really work on? And I will say, having those hybrid options, 96, if you wanted to use the specific number, 96% of my team takes advantage of a hybrid option. And I'm kind of wondering, all of you, and you don't have to like raise your hand or anything, but think to yourself, if you had a hybrid option, would you be taking advantage of that? Or would you, like to continue remote, totally remote or totally in the office? And hybrid does just, again, offer that best of both worlds. You get the camaraderie, you get the connection, you get the coordination, but at the same time, you still have that flexibility. So let's talk a little bit about the 5 C's or the 5 challenges of hybrid work. So there are challenges sometimes. Communication. When you look at communication, you're looking at the way in which your team communicates, the way they connect, whether or not you have a culture of your workspace or your work environment, coordination and creativity. And so these are challenges that we're seeing across the board. And we're also seeing these be items that are really things that everyone is tackling with. So this isn't just a workforce system. This isn't just a college system. This isn't just a business system, but the whole country really, as we look into hybrid work environments, are looking at communication. So as we're looking at those C's, we're looking at communication. Right now, when you're looking at a hybrid team, the obvious reliance is on technology to create a basis of communication. So what tools do you use? And we'll talk about a little bit about those when we get there at the end. What are some tools you can use? What are some items that you can use to open up those lines of communication? One of the things you don't have in a hybrid work environment is, like when Kirsten and I are both in the office, we do a lot of those little short meetings or those, conversations that we have as we walk to the restroom or as we're walking out for lunch or whatever. You don't have those in a hybrid work environment if the 2 people are not located in the same space, but there are opportunities for that. Do you have an instant message or do you have a text way in which you can communicate? A lot of that comes down to leadership. So coordination, a collaborative work involves coordination, and by working hybrid teams present significantly more coordination challenges than working face-to-face. There are those areas where we're working to coordinate, but you have to be intentional. And that's one of those things is the work coordinated? Are we making that time? One of the things that I think is happening and that I'm read a lot is happening not only to all of us in the workforce development system is we're having meetings because we can. Well, let's jump on a Zoom and discuss that when it could really be an email. So we went from a time pre-pandemic where we'd have meetings and they'd be these big day-long meetings. And we moved into, okay, now we're on Zoom and we need to have meetings or calls for everything. Whereas possibly we need to be looking at assessing our time and valuing our time. And are all of the meetings necessary, or can that collaboration and coordination be done via email and then being more intentional with our time in those meetings? One of the other challenges is connection, and it's something that can be achieved through technology, but also does have a little bit of limiting factor there. And if you look at a team, especially a team that has not been working together for a long time and does not have those historical contexts to fall back on, For people who are not spending in-person time together, you want to create those opportunities, and we'll talk about that as well. And then creativity. Creativity can be endangered in a hybrid work environment. Collective creativity, brainstorming. How do you find ways in which to do that? And there's some great technology aspects there, but there's also just be sure you're setting and making the most use of that time when you are all in the office. Whether you have that for coordination time, whether you have that for creativity time, whether you just have that for culture and communication time. But making sure that if you do set anchor days as a manager and you are setting time when everybody's in the office at the same time, are you making the most of that work? We don't want to just come in and all be on Zooms and not actually be having those connections, those communication, those coordination, and that creative time, because then why are we really in the office? And the other thing is that when you look at creativity, you have the idea of team creativity, but you also have individual creativity, because there is that feeding of back and forth, that idea of, hey, how does this look? Seeking feedback. Sometimes when you are a solely remote employee, you want to do well and then you send it off and there's not that back and forth. And we really want to encourage that back and forth, which gets us to our 5C, which is culture. And really looking at what a culture is within your organization. What do you want the culture to be within your organization? And how do you define culture within your organization? And so, how do we address these challenges, right? We talked a little bit about the challenges, but how do we address the challenges? There's a 5C checklist, and it's that idea of evaluate, analyze, plan, and implement. So as a team, sit down with your team, and Kirsten should be very excited because after all this research that I've been doing, we're going to be doing this as a team and evaluate. When we look at the 5 C's, how do we rate ourselves? To do a little evaluation. Not only you as the manager or the director, but also allow your team to be a part of that. Where are we doing well? Where are we falling short? And they say, you can give yourself an A-B scale for that, or an A, B, C, D, E, F. Or you can give yourself, I give us 1 for communication, I give us a 2 for connection, I give us 3 for culture. Culture one's fun because I also challenge you when you're in that analyze time, ask them what they feel the culture of your organization is, or what's the culture of your team. Because what you might be thinking the culture of your team is not necessarily being seen by the other members of your team. So we want to be sure that we are fostering the culture that we want to have fostered. And then make a plan. And the way we look at the plan is address the poorest grade first. So kind of like when you're working on a class, if I have A's in all of these topics and I've got a B or a C in this topic, I need to address that C first. So keep doing what you're doing in, say, communication and collaboration, but then maybe we up the game in creativity. So looking at ways in which we can plan and make a plan with the team on where you want to address those. And then most importantly, implement that plan. If you say you're going to do it, go forth and do it, and find ways in which you can coordinate, collaborate, and communicate as you move into your hybrid work environment. So some success tips. And these are, again, lots of research. I have a whole 2 slides on resources, but these are also what I felt were really great tips. Coordinate time in the office. I think that's been a game changer for us. I had I had a few members who started right prior to the pandemic. So we got to see them in the office for a little bit. And then we were, just 2 weeks out of the office, which ended up being 2 years. And then I've had some newcomers come on, and having that coordinated time in the office is really, really important to allow you to have just that camaraderie. We have, and I'm blanking on what I've named it, but basically it's like a chew and chat lunch. So you bring your lunch, no expectation of buying lunch, but you bring your lunch. We all have lunch together once a month. I do know teams who have lunch together every day if they're in the office. So if they're in the office 3 days a week, 3 days a week, they all bring their lunch and they have lunch together. My team's a little too busy for that, so we opted for once a month. And then we do have staff meetings where we look at what's everybody doing, progress, things like that. Allowing the time to have personal connections, allowing the time to have conversation that's not work related is really important to the growth of your team. So keep that in mind as well. Fostering personal connections, learning about people, having those conversations, possibly starting a meeting. We ironically happen to be a team of dog owners. So everyone on our team owns dogs and loves dogs and has pets that we all talk about. And so those are a personal connection, and also give us advice on whether or not we need to have more dogs or less dogs, but that is a fun conversation. And then create a culture of transparency and trust. And what I mean by that is, as a manager, as a director, make your calendar public and block off time for focus and personal appointments. So I'll use myself as an example. We use Outlook within our system, and so everyone can see my calendar and they can all see when I have appointments or personal time. The reason you want to do that is it allows your team to know when you'll be slower to respond to things, and plus sharing your calendar prevents people from scheduling meetings that when you're unavailable. So it really is a win-win. And then share your communication preferences with your team and let them know when you typically answer messages. For example, let your team know if you prefer email or to go over Teams. We use Microsoft Teams for our messages. I know some individuals or some organizations use Slack. They're all very similar in those ways that you can have that instant message. And set expectations that you may not respond right away if you're trying to focus. So I really encourage my team to team block or to time block. There's a whole session we've done on that as well. But the idea of time blocking and saying, okay, during this time, I'm going to be in the meeting. During this time, I'm going to be working on, especially when it comes to grant writing time, for me, I really have to block my schedule, because if I don't, I won't get those things done. You can also set status on your calendar and messaging apps like Slack that indicate when you're focusing or unavailable to chat. So allowing your team to know when you're focusing on something, and that's how I time block my calendar. I'm working on this grant at this time. So it's one of those things that I don't want bothered. My team knows that if I'm focusing on that. And it allows time to focus, which is that fourth bullet there, which is so very important. One of the things, before we go on, I wanted to say that try to avoid micromanaging in a hybrid work environment. I'm an advocate for avoiding micromanaging as a whole, but if you want a successful work environment that is a hybrid work environment, you want to avoid micromanaging. As a manager, it is important to trust that your team is doing their best, and that if you can't see them in person, that they're still doing their best. Once you set guidelines for your hybrid work schedule, trust your team to follow them. Avoid checking up on them. Let's not look at a time where you're going to call or gotcha or things like that. Trust that they're doing their work. This is a hands-off approach, can be hard, but it's backed up by data. And there's so much research that says that people at a high trust companies report 74% less stress and 50% higher productivity and 76% more engagement than employees at a low trust company. So if you are a manager who likes to micromanage, it's going to be hard, but trust that when you set the parameters, that your team will be doing the work. And I will say a tip, make sure you set clear parameters. Like if your expectation is that everyone is working from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and everyone is taking lunch at noon, then you need to let them know that, let your team know that, because there is a chance that there will be requests for flexibility. And there will be people who will take flexibility. So if you say this is our work day, and if you want something different, let me know. Like ISU sets that for us and we have forms, we can do that. But if you don't, then you're going to cause yourself stress as a manager, and that's really not healthy either. So just think about that. More trust, less micromanaging. So the last one there, allow time for focus. This is something that I think a lot of us are pretty bad at. And I know I'm one that is very guilty of being bad at allowing time for focus, because my time for focus tends to happen between 7 and 11 p.m. When all of you are doing other things, I can get focused on the work I need to get done. When I'm in the office, I feel that it's harder to focus. When I'm at home, working from home, it's actually a little bit easier to focus for me because I don't have distractions. And we'll talk about mitigating distractions in a little bit. But one of the things that they recommend, which I find exciting, is stopping the noise, prioritizing focus for your team. Designating, and I know there's teams at State Farm that are doing this because I work with people who are doing this. Not work with, I are friends with. Designate one no meeting day each week. Give people time to find their state of flow for their work. This should be a day when employees can work from home if they want to, but it's a day of no meetings. I realize that that's almost terribly unrealistic for the work that we do. Those of you who work with me on this webinar, you're like, whoa, Amy, really? I get it, but really try. And that's going to be one of my New Year's resolutions, is to try to have a no meeting day each week to give people time to find a nice workflow. or an idea of catching up. I used to do this and was very intentional about it, that Fridays was my no meeting day. And that I would get all caught up so that I went into the weekend very restful and came back on Monday ready to go. And again, you all know things creep in, but consider it, just something to consider. Define what should constitute a meeting and when you can just send an email or another form of asynchronous communication. And by asynchronous communication, this is something that I saw throughout the research. It's that idea of, I'm going to send you an email, but I'm not going to have the anticipation that you reply right away. I'm going to send something out there for you to work on. I'm going to give an assignment. I'm going to give enough details. And that means that you're going to respond to it within a realistic amount of time. I'm not saying weeks or anything like that, but if it takes you 48 hours or 24 hours, that's acceptable. That's the idea of asynchronous communication. Remember, not all meetings need to be 30 minutes or an hour long. Sometimes a 15-minute check-in is all you need. I think that's one of the things that technology has not helped us with. When we set a meeting, it's always an hour on Zoom. When we set a meeting on Outlook, it's always an hour. And maybe we don't need an hour. So we need to be thinking about, can we do more in less amount of time? Or can we also make the best use of our time? And I know we have, sometimes it's out of our control, but being on time for meetings and making the most use of the time that we have together. And then normalize longer response times. 50% of managers and 42% of individuals contributors feel like they have to respond to notifications right away. If somebody emails you, and I said to my team, if I'm emailing, I think I even have a signature on my email if I'm working late that says, let's stop glorifying overworking. If this time doesn't suit you, it's because it worked for me. Something in that context. But the idea is that constantly checking notifications drains us away from focus. And since we can take up to 20 minutes to regain momentum after an interruption, we need to set more realistic expectations around response times and empower your team to snooze notifications when they need to. Understanding that you can't just have them snoozed all the time, but at the same time, if you're trying to focus on this, possibly the day-to-day emails can wait till 3 o'clock or till 2 o'clock or something like that. So just things, setting those boundaries, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So I'm going to pause there and ask Kirsten if we have any questions, because I cannot see the chat. Well, I guess I can. Are there any questions?
There's only one question, and Craig Kissinger asked it. Can you share that study? But it was at the very beginning. I think he's referring to the Asana study, talking about
it's all in the resources. Yeah. So when you have that PowerPoint at the back, there's links, and everything that I'm talking about is a combination of all of those together.
Awesome.
And then yes, Kirsten put in there the signature tagline, and it says, "I'm sending this message now because it suits me. I do not expect that you will read, respond to, or act on it outside of your regular business hours. Let's work together to stop glorifying overworking and start celebrating balance." I stole that from a colleague of mine who works on the West Coast, and I saw it and thought it was fantastic. And I don't use it in my everyday, because I'm sure some of you are sitting there saying, "Amy, I email with you and I've not seen that." If it's during regular business hours, I don't traditionally use that. But if it's after hours or early, my 7 a.m. emails, I do use it, because I don't want anyone feeling that just because I'm responding to something when it suits me, that it's going to work for you. I mean, I have, and they're not small anymore. I used to be able to say I have little people in my life. They're not little, they're both bigger than me now. So I have young men in my life who dominate my schedule. I mean, I don't think everybody spends Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights at basketball games, but if you do, you understand that those are a priority, and then you come back and you get the work done. So some tips for hybrid work environments, and these are fun. So focus on the core employee engagement. And what I mean by that is really looking at the idea of focusing on the person involved. So have tools and resources they need, know what is expected of them, feel that they have their opinion matters, experience opportunities for learning and growth, and receive recognition for doing good work. So are you doing all those things? Are you looking at the ways in which you engage with your employees? A lot of times things move at a very fast pace, and we're from one big project to the next big project to the next big project. And we haven't taken the time to acknowledge that, wow, we accomplished this. And that was a big lift, and we really worked our butts off. and taking a moment to celebrate is so important for your team. Experience opportunities to learn and grow. Are you providing your team with opportunities for professional development? Having the tools and resources they need. If you ask someone to instant message you or to chat you and they're not aware of how Teams work or Microsoft Teams that application is, then that's not really giving them the tools and resources they need. So focus on the core employer engagement. And the next one is up your meeting game. And we talked about that a little bit, that idea of making sure that you're making the most of your meetings and being mindful of what those meetings are. Be intentional about how, why, and how long you're going to sit for those meetings. If you schedule a 25-minute meeting and you keep them for an hour, that's not nice, that's not good, and that's not something that people can schedule around. So looking at your digital communication tools and make sure you're scheduling those meetings. If you're looking at face-to-face meetings, those are fantastic as well, but allow time for people to drive there, especially if your team is located not all within the same area. So if you're looking at statewide teams or teams that are a little farther out. Regardless of how you meet, be fully present when you meet. One of the tricks that they talk about using is saying, I see you, with your voice, words, tone, body language. Don't multitask. These little things are very notorious for pulling our attention away. So up your meeting game and try not to be the person who's multitasking during a meeting. If you're going to attend the meeting, attend the meeting. And then acknowledge the human experience. And I think that is just a great part of being a team. Looking at the ways in which you are, I mean, when we were at home, we spent a lot of time talking about pulling back that curtain. I know there were some best practices of saying, okay, show what your office looks like. Let's talk about things in your house. Let's engage with our teams and be present. And you could show those things. We really need to acknowledge that people are human, that life does happen in a hybrid work environment. We really want leaders and colleagues to lead with empathy. That was one of the wonderful moments during the pandemic, and he actually did it several times during the pandemic. Our Governor Pritzker, led with the idea of we need to lead with empathy. We need to be aware that this is a human experience, that everyone is experiencing something related to the pandemic, and we always need to be, in every instance with the public, we need to lead with empathy. And I really love that message, and I continue that on, that you need to listen to see humanness in each other, and organizations need to add that idea of how to really up their mental health resources, possibly looking at ways in which you can take the walking meeting. That's a great idea. Not today. It's going to be rainy and craptacular today. However, when it's nice outside, Kirsten and I have gone on many walking meetings. You just take the meeting out around the block and be able to walk. So then you're having that idea of leaving that confined space, moving to a different space. But acknowledging the human experience is a really great tip for hybrid work environments. The next one, I'm just kind of going back and forth there on the list, is the idea of value people over desk, and really looking at where we are versus where we were in spring of 2020. Many of us have hired or have new team members. I've talked about that. They're living a distance or are not necessarily in close proximity to our team. And one of the things that I want to really focus on with the value people over desk is bringing the team together is our culture. And our culture was never about the desk. It was never about the 15-minute message. It was never about the example that they gave, I giggle at because I'm a state employee, but the Friday IPA and the draft, IPA on draft in the break room, I'm like, yeah, that would never happen in my line of work, but lovely for the people that it does happen for. But the idea that culture is about how we connect, how we communicate, how we see each other, how we trust each other. And culture can transcend time zones and miles and can really bring us together. So when we're looking at those challenges and what is our culture, that's why it's so important to ask the team what they feel your culture is. And remember, it's not about the office space, it's about the people who you engage with in that office space that really make it important. Be mindful of time. That's always a big one, and that's been a big one for me since forever. Buckle down and focus when you need to, reflect when you need to, charge when you need to, and collaborate when you need to. Time is not replaceable, And it is be intentional about how you manage your time and how you spend your team's time together. So as I said, I want to be collaborative as a team, but I also want to acknowledge that we all have a lot of meetings and a lot of different deliverables that we're hitting. So our camaraderie time is over lunch, and it allows us to come together and eat our lunch together and have that chew and chat time, but not necessarily be a meeting on someone's schedule. Being strategic about communication is that idea of being strategic about the communication, really allowing the communication to not be like a directive every time it's given. So not that top-down communication. There's a lot of research that says we should do away with top-down communication. We should move into that idea of connecting and connector communication. What are the needs of the system? And instead of I'm going to tell you how to fix the issue, we're going to work together on how to fix a story. Or fix the issue or fix whatever the problem is. And I think there's a lot to be said about that, being strategic about our communication and our communication ways in which we speak to one another and how we go about that. Creating a community, and that is possible not only online, but also in person. What are those things that you want to do to create a community? What are those things that you want to do? Social media has shown us that there's ways that we can create a strong community, bonds across miles, and there's tons of social media communities out there. So how do you and your organization have a community of individuals? And what are those things, as I mentioned, the dog lovers within our office, but also what are those other things that your office, that your peers, that your work colleagues are engrossed in or are talking about? Maybe it's a Netflix movie, maybe it's golf, maybe it's some other topic, but what are those things that you can really connect on? So creating that community and allowing that space for conversation. See and use the whole playing field. And I really like this one. So again, I'm spending a lot of time in the bleacher seats. It's bleacher season. And so just like in a football game or basketball game, it's easy to focus on the employees who are leading big projects and coming to the office every day and not necessarily focus on the whole team. And there's a lot of things that your team members or traits or tricks or strategies or just strengths that your team members might have that you're not utilizing. And so take time to acknowledge the contributions of all team members near and far, whether they're in the office every day or if they are, working from farther away. Tell short success stories that demonstrate the connection and engagement and use a broad array of team members. Nothing happens in isolation. All of the big projects that have been achieved because of a lot of people working very, very hard collectively and collaboratively together. So be cognizant of that and be sure that we're spreading that idea of giving the accolades, sharing the praise, not just for the team leads, but also for those who are on down, all the players in the game. As a mother of a lineman, it is just as important to the quarterback that the line holds and does their job that it is that the quarterback throws accurately. So if the line wasn't there, they'd be getting squashed. Define outcomes and let your team deliver. We talked about that a little bit already, but that idea of autonomy is the breakfast of champions. A flexible work environment can spark innovation, thinking, and doing, but we also want to be able to trust our team. Some team individuals are going to require more support and structure and fluid work environments. I absolutely understand that. And personally, I've experienced that. I have team members who they work from home 2-3 days a week. I check in with them some days, some weeks, every day. Sometimes I don't talk to them for a couple days, but I know the work is being done. I know things are moving forward. We have mechanisms in place to make sure things are moving along. I've had other team members who, if they were asked to work from home, they can't focus at home. They have too many distractions. They have too many other things they want to do. Home is their sanctuary, so they need to be in the office. Number one, if you're a person who's being managed, know your strengths and identify those and be clear about those. But also as a manager, identify. It's okay to check in. I'm not saying don't check in. I'm saying use that trust. Don't stand over people. Don't micromanage unless you feel or someone gives you reason to micromanage. And you'll know. I mean, that's just, you'll know. And then be less of a supervisor, more of a coach. And I really, again, can you tell it's bleacher season? I don't love the term supervisor. And when you're looking at team members, if it's 8 feet away in a cube or and they're in their home 80 miles away. They need someone to clarify direction, provide resources, and offer recognition for doing a great job. So in other words, we're asking, or the research is telling us, to be a coach. Help team members with their daily learn, stretch themselves and be their best, engage in two-way conversations that offer multiple benefits, encourage professional development, or when they're asking to do something or wanting to do something, have them justify to you how it's going to help them in their career trajectory. It's that idea of, we see the people that you're invested in and we want them to grow. We want them to build their trust. We want them to engage. We want them to be productive. The other thing is creating a culture of community. And I know the bullet up there does say create community, but it's also that idea of working together instead of against one another. My team, I promise you, Kirsten, if she thought she was competing all the time with Brittany, we would not get as much done. They're not competing. They're on the same team. We're working together. We have the same goals. So that allows us to move that ball and allows us to achieve our goals. I know that was a heavy talking slide, but common work from home challenges, just some things that you might be seeing. Social isolation, lack of FaceTime, coworkers, supervisors, face-to-face, especially if those individuals live by themselves and don't have the bleacher time that I get to have or I've spoke of. So consider collaboration tools to improve employee engagement and increase social interaction. Video fatigue. On the flip side of the previous bullet, using Zoom all the time can aid in connection and can have consequences. Empower employees to decide as a team when meetings internally they want to be on camera or not. And I will say that there are meetings that when I come on, I'm like, yeah, it's not a camera day. I also look at my schedule, and depending on who I'm meeting with, I know whether or not I need to be on camera or not. So if it's just Kirsten and I meeting to hash something out, we don't have to be on camera. If we're meeting with one of our agencies that we represent, we absolutely need to be on camera. And those are just things that you know as you lay out your day. Communication breakdowns and bottlenecks. When working remotely, you can peek over the cubicle or slip down the hall to see a colleague or supervisor around, ask a question. Managers can help address these issues by modeling effective communication strategy. Reaching out, we use Teams a lot. We can instant message people a lot. And depending on the user that you are. So I am a PC user. I am not an Apple all the way user. I have an iPad, I have my personal phone, and I have my Dell PC. Kirsten, on the other hand, I'm going to pick on her for a second. She is an Apple all the way user. So if I instant messenger on Teams, I mean, I see it on my phone too, but I mean, she has, they're all connected. So, look at those communication strategies. And again, setting those parameters with your team is so important. Surrounding distractions, whether it's a coffee shop customer or, encourage designated workspace. So you're keeping those distractions out of the way. And some of the ones that they say there, again, I kind of cut and pasted that from an article, which you'll see at the end of the reference. But even that shout out from the living room during a Zoom call or distractions seem to come into the remote work territory, but try to work with your team to set those designated areas to limit distractions. And again, also as an individual, be sure that if you know what kind of meeting you're walking into. If Kirsten and I are on a call and we're working on planning something and my son walks into the room, that's fine. But if I'm presenting like I am today, the door is closed. I'm limiting my distractions. So things are taken care of that way. Prioritize. So these are just some best practices for you as an individual. So best practices for hybrid work environment. Prioritize and focus on output, adhere to routines, focus on the positives, ensure your work from home infrastructure is set boundaries. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth. Don't neglect your workplace culture, learn new skills, be strategic about communication, and create workspaces. You do not have to just sit in your home office. You can also move about your house, and some companies and entities encourage you to go to the park and work that day on your remote day, or go to some place that allows you to have a change of scenery. Again, I caution you and say it depends on what you have going on that day. If that is your no meeting day and you're just catching up on email and getting some projects done, that change of pace might be very helpful to you. I know during the pandemic, as things started to open up, going to a library where it was nice and quiet and you had a really strong Wi-Fi is a great option for your work from home day. So we're going to dive into a couple of these. I'm not going to dive into all of these, but prioritize and focus on the output, streamline, identify essential work, an area that needs to be focused on, eliminate non-essential meetings. I think that's just a good practice across the board. And optimize your collaboration tools. Do not try to do too many. Like, you don't need to have Slack and Teams and Asana and all those things going on. Like, decide what your team's going to use and stick with those things. Focus. We've talked a lot about focus in our time together today. So focus, be disciplined, clarify team roles and make sure everyone knows them on your team and in your home. This is, I actually stole this from a colleague of mine that says, Mom, there's a meeting 9:30 to 11. Do not enter. The answer to your question might be upstairs in the wash. No piece of fruit. I don't know what's for dinner. It's in your bedroom. And so we all know that there's days that our children are home, or that there are people in our home that will be in our home. So set those boundaries, allow your family or your people who you live with to know. Learn to be more efficient with your meetings, agendas, outcomes, and next steps. So setting those agendas, we've had a lot of webinars on good and effective meetings. How do we set agendas? How do we make sure that we have outcomes, that meetings are, that time is used not just to come and, engage, but also to have an outcome, have a next step. Where do we go from here? Consider creating a list of what you will deliver by the end of the day. Pro tip, prioritize your to-do list, eat the worm. And there's a whole session on that as well, like the idea of eating the worm. Those things that you don't want to do at the beginning of the day. So they're done and you're not saving them to the end of the day. Eating the worm, yes, it's not gross, but doing those things that are least fun first thing. Create an inviting workspace. Your head is your most important workspace, so you will need to have your head in the game. Where can you reasonably work? What is your ideal work environment? Do not work in your bed. That's been said since 2020, so we're going to continue to say that. And avoid distractions. Shut off the news. Don't worry about the dirty dishes. Don't have your home office set up so it's at the kitchen table where you're looking at your dirty dishes. Have a designated workspace. And yes, please shut off the news, because there's so much crazy stuff on there all the time. Develop a ritual. And there is a Harvard Business Review that has some 15 questions about remote work. Great resource there. Things you need to be doing, and you want to set a ritual. And there's all these studies coming out right now about sleep and the importance of sleep and having your ritual. So, you get up, you work out, you take a shower, you get dressed, whatever you do every day, be sure you're doing every day. Set boundaries, set office hours. I love this, found this last night. Remind me in the morning, we need to talk about boundaries. She is sitting there in bed planning her presentation. Don't overpromise. Keep your calendar up to date. So that is, again, one of my frustrations as a manager, but also one of those things that I work very hard to make sure that my calendar is up to date. So if I have a commitment, it's on the calendar and I know it's coming. That's not only for my own sanity, but also for collaborating with my team. Time block for your task. You use your calendar to block non-meeting work as a signal to colleagues, and then take necessary breaks. I'm not saying you need to time block your breaks. That's take your break when you can take your break. But at the same time, allow and be sure you're taking breaks for lunch and such. And if you're working with individuals on different time zones or on any projects or anything like that, block your lunch so so your people who are working with you know that that's your lunchtime. So for example, if you can view a calendar of someone on Mountain Time, their lunch hour is not the same as our lunch hour. We find that often with presenters. They want to present at 12 Central Time. I'm like, no, that's noon. Like, no one's going to be, everybody wants to be eating lunch at lunchtime. That's when our, calendar says it's time for lunch. Some technologies to facilitate remote work. There's a great guide there. There's a link. Office Essentials, file sharing, virtual meetings. We're going to dive into those a little bit. File sharing options. So I'm sure most of you have these established by your organization, but there's Microsoft OneDrive, there's SharePoint, there's Dropbox, there's Google. If you are one of the do-it institutions, please be sure you ask them which they like best, because some of these they like and some of these they do not like. And I know for us, our institution set these parameters for us. So ask around, what is your file sharing option? As we are at 2023, I'm sure everyone has one that they are using within their organization. If you don't, check those out. Those are some great links that you can pick which one works best for you. Virtual meetings, so Zoom meetings, Google Hangout, WebEx, or GoToMeeting. There's a lot of different options. We have become and embraced Zoom here, and there's a lot of Zoom everywhere. But Google Hangout and WebEx and GoToMeetings, I know WebEx is endorsed or supported by the state. And then there are still GoToMeetings and Google Hangouts that are used as well. So whatever works best for your institution and for your team is going to work well. And I just liked that little cartoon that I added in there. because we're all in different places at different times, that instant messaging or chat is so important and so helpful. So Microsoft Teams and Google Hangout both have that chat function. So you can just chat somebody and have that thread going. Slack is a collaborative hub that replaces email, and you can help your team work together. It again has that instant chat function. And then Cisco's Jabber is an all-in-one communication tool for business, and it's used to send instant messages. Ask around if you're in an agency or institution, and if you are in a community-based organization, take a look at these and see which one's going to work best for you. But I'm going to tell you, this is phenomenal, because this instant messaging chat is what replaces that. I'm going to pop over to Bob's cube. I'm going to pop over to Mark's office and see, what he knows about this. You can just message him on Teams. I'm most familiar with Teams because that's what we use every day. And it'll show you, like, if it's yellow, they're busy, or if it's yellow, they're coming up on a meeting. If it's red, they're in a meeting. If it's green, they're free. And they have a little icon by their name so you can see what's going on there. So just something to think about. Project management platforms. This is also a big plus to a hybrid work environment if you have a good project management platform. Microsoft Teams allows that document sharing. It's fantastic for all of those things: storage, application of integration, workplace chat. Basecamp, not as familiar with, but have done a lot of research on. It's a project-based app, and it can access your browser. It's all on your browser, whereas Teams is an application. Basecamp's more on your browser. Trello is a collaborative tool that organizes your projects, and that's really for how those projects are moving forward. So it's true project management. And then Asana is web and mobile application, and it helps your team organize and track and manage their work. Trello and Asana both allow you to generate reports. So you can say, my team's been working on this project, and at the end of the quarter, you can say who's worked on what and what's completed. It's fantastic. And again, something that's really helpful when you have people in different places. All right, that was very fast talking a little bit, but I want to open the floor now to questions. I threw a lot at you. There's a lot of great perks to hybrid work environment. There's a lot of fantastic strategies to think about. So I want to close with this cartoon. After working from home throughout the pandemic, I wasn't looking forward to going back to the office, but the company has introduced a hybrid home office system. And the person on the phone says, cool, how's that working for you? And she says, I've been cleaned out of coffee and the cat's been stepped on twice. So apparently her team just moved into her home with her, or she brought her cat to the office, however you want to look at that. So what questions do we have, Kirsten? Don't think we have any in the chat. Does anybody have a question? You can post that in the chat, or you're welcome to thank you, Amy. Sorry, as a mom of kids who play sports, the sports analogies come through, as do the dog stories sometimes. There's 2 pages of resources here for you as well, just some great resources on, working from home, remote work. And then these are a lot of the ones that we shared as well today, 10 steps for successful. So you're going to see all of, when you go to read those articles, you're going to see a lot of that information that I shared today. I do think hybrid, and from what I'm reading, hybrid is the way in which we're going to be moving forward. And so really it's that idea of what is best for you and for your team, and what parameters do you want to share? Where do you want to be? And then also working within your institution. So a lot of things in some cases are going to be spelled out for you. Like we do have the option for fully remote employees, but they have to be hired as fully remote employees. So, I mean, our institution lays a lot of the groundwork for us. And Christine says, thanks for organized perspective. Love the hybrid. I do also think one of the big key things is setting those boundaries and making sure if you do. So my spouse and I both work from home on different days. We both have hybrid schedules, but we do not ever work from home on the same day. because he's very loud. And that leads to me having to close doors and having to use my headset all the time because he speaks very loud when he's on a call. Not sure why he speaks so loud on a call. He doesn't all the time, but just that idea of setting those boundaries and allowing you to have that space. And then also looking at, there's a lot of misconceptions around, I'm going to stop sharing and come over here. There's a lot of misconceptions around working from home. There's also that bias of individuals who work all the time in the office and they feel you have to be in the office and they're like, oh, well, this mistake is made because they were. No, that's not the case. People who work from home effectively work from home effectively. And so they would be able to do their job at home or in the office. And we should be able to tell that from the last 3 years of being in a remote work environment. Any other questions? See if there's anything on the Q&A. All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. I'm very excited. I know, as I said, I learned a lot in, again, I've been working in a hybrid environment. I've gone to, there's a lot of professional development done by ISU as we came back. So I felt well situated to present this, but then as I dove in a little bit more, I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna implement some of these great strategies. So thank you all for being with us today. We really do appreciate it. And I will hold on for another second, but otherwise have a great day. And I will not tell anybody that we got done 30 minutes early. So if you had this blocked on your calendar, have a wonderful 30 minutes back to your day. And Kirsten just threw the survey into the chat. So if you could take a minute and fill out that survey, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.